A mostly bright start, though there could be some high-level cloud making the sunshine a little bit hazy. Across central eastern parts of England, it is going to turn a bit cloudier as we go through the day, but staying largely dry. However, towards the north and west, we have that feature I mentioned at the start, and this is going to bring some very wet and windy weather, turning really pretty unpleasant. Feeling unpleasant then towards the northwest, but in the southeast, temperatures getting into the low 20s, so warm enough in any sunshine. More wet weather to come as we go through Thursday. The system will gradually make its way southeastwards, but it breaks up, diminishes a little bit as it goes. So in the southeast, just seeing a bit of cloud, bit of rain. It won't be as intense or as impactful as the wet and windy weather we're going to see in the northwest. Another spell of wet weather coming through on Friday, but signs of something drier through the long weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GBNews Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, live from God's own county of Somerset on State of the Nation tonight. Sir Keir Starmer has nailed his colours to the mast of the shirking ship of working from home. Britain now faces a future of low productivity, high taxes and stagnant growth. Librarians are not to hold meetings in racist buildings. What you may ask is a racist building? Well, we may all need a lesson in critical whiteness studies to find out. This time last year, the great Baronet of Somerset, Sir Benjamin Slade, joined State of the Nation in a quest to find an heir to his title. Did he find one? Find out in a moment. Plus, is it 2024 or 1984? Can silent prayer amount to a crime? Well, on this occasion, freedom of speech has won after a payout and an apology from the police was issued to Isabel Vaughan Spruce, who will be joining me shortly. State of the Nation starts now. Holding the State of the Nation flabellum for this evening is the former Conservative MP, Neil Parish. But as ever, I want to know your views. It's a crucial part of the programme. Mail me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's one of your favourite parts of the day, the News Bulletin with Mark White.
It's just after 8 p.m. Good evening. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. New video has been released showing the moment a British super yacht disappeared from view in a major storm off Sicily early on Monday morning. The grainy security camera footage shows the 75-metre-tall mast of the Bayesian just visible through the torrential rain and storm force winds. The mast eventually disappears after the vessel tipped over and sank. Well, efforts by dive teams to reach inside the wreck are being hampered by significant amounts of debris. A body recovered yesterday has been identified as the vessel's chef, Canadian Ricaldo Thomas. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his daughter. David Tabazel is a friend and former business partner of Mike Lynch. He spoke exclusively to Michelle Dewberry earlier this evening and said if anyone can survive, his friend can.
Any chance of him surviving this, he has the strength to do this, and I hope that we aren't talking the past tense. He is a remarkable man, and if you've had the blessing and the honour to have worked with him or known him, he's a force of nature and somebody who I think will become a business and intellectual and scientific legend in the decades to come. Emergency services in Lincolnshire were called to the scene of a rescue operation at a seaside pleasure park earlier this evening. The incident at Botton's Pleasure Park in Skegness followed a malfunction of one of the rides. It's reported up to 20 people were stranded in mid-air for a time as fire service personnel attempted to get them down safely. There are no reports of any serious injuries. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel claims Hamas was using the school as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured on the 7th of October during the terrorist attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. King Charles visited Southport earlier today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in which 3 girls died and others were injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. Well, you're right up to date. Those are the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We're back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Labour is determined to wreck the public sector by entrenching low productivity while increasing costs. The civil service is bloated. There are nearly 100,000 more of them than in 2015, while productivity is low. Amazingly, since 1997, public sector productivity has fallen by an average of 0.1% per year, an unprecedented problem in a technological age. Meanwhile, the private sector's productivity has been growing, albeit too slowly. This ends up costing you money. As the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pointed out on the campaign trail, public sector productivity is about 5% lower than it was before the pandemic. If we were simply able to bring that productivity back to where it was then, that would be worth £20 billion and it would improve services. This sort of saving is equivalent to abolishing inheritance tax 3 times over, or nearly getting rid of all fuel duties. In other words, one of the main ambitions of any government ought to be driving public sector productivity to ensure you get value for your money. Alas, that is the opposite of what is happening. Not only has the Labour government engaged in a cynical quid pro quo with its union chums, taking nearly £500,000 in campaign donations before offering the unions massive pay rises, not only are they inflating idlers' rights, such as the right to switch off, but now the Prime Minister is backing the right to work from home, with Number 10 warning that a culture of presenteeism is bad for productivity. But we've seen, since people started working from home, productivity has fallen. So this is nonsense. Working from home has been tried and is failing. How many of my viewers have tried calling HMRC and actually both got through and received a sensible answer? If it really did lead to an increase in productivity, we certainly haven't seen it since its popularity increased during the pandemic. It was one of my main ambitions as Minister for Government Efficiency to get civil servants back to the office. And so you may see some irony that I, this week, am working from home. But I would otherwise be on holiday, but I didn't want to miss you. So here I am at home in the summer. Interestingly, Stanford University has done a study on the efficacy of working from home, and last year it showed that it was between 10 and 20% less productive. You see, we are led by people, as Ross Clark said in The Spectator today, who really don't understand what makes societies prosper. It doesn't lie with inflating workers' rights to switch off. It doesn't lie with the public sector, and certainly doesn't lie with working from home. The answer lies with unleashing the animal spirits of the private sector, cutting back the size of the overmighty state and rolling back its overreach. Deregulation, low energy costs, cutting taxes. Till the Labour Party realises this, we will be doomed to a future of high taxes, low productivity, low growth, making everybody poorer and idler. Being idle won't make you rich. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com, and I've got a special reader of the Mail Mogs later on. But I'm joined now by the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, how very good to have you on. Do you think that working from home is going to make things more efficient or improve public services, or is just an idler's charter?
I think the problem with it, it sounds so attractive. And if you are an ordinary person and you're not paying huge, the cost of railways has just gone up thanks to what Mr. Starmer has just done. If you aren't paying to travel to work and you're able to kind of get your nursery days fixed between you and your spouse and various other things, honestly, everybody who wants to will want to work from home. It is massively attractive, and equally it will be massively effective against productivity. No productivity can work where actually you are going to not face any kind of sense of delivery with somebody looking to make sure that you are delivering. There is a complete... People are not actually made to do stuff on their own. There is a percentage out there who don't need a kind of a figure lying over them. They are a very small percentage. The rest, if given the choice, will work less hard and do tomorrow what, if they're in the office, they should do today. There is no doubt about it. That US polling or research that you did is an absolute shocker. If that happens to our country, right? We're already completely up creek, right? We're completely up it. If we lost 5 or 10% then, honestly, our taxes would be off the dial. If you take what Labour want to do, plus the quotes £22 billion hole, and we don't gain proper productivity, honestly, our country will be totally done for. It's a very, very serious moment in our time.
And isn't it one of those things that is self-evident that even people who like working from home know that they are less productive, that anybody with children who are at home finds that their workflow is interrupted, that things happen, that the telephone rings about the boiler? It's just something that is so startlingly obvious. It didn't really need Stanford University to do a survey to show it was 10-20% less productive. Common sense tells you that, and the government ought to have enough common sense to know that in the delivery of public services, it needs people to be in the office.
That is correct, but this is the issue. It is so attractive to work from home that actually, by the way, you know, your own side actually seemed to be vaguely in favour of it. Boris was, right? So the situation now, I fear that the genie is out of the bottle. That Labour will want to serve those people who can say, for instance, the Guildford to Waterloo, the cost of commuting is £2,500 a year if you're a season ticket holder, right? It costs you an absolute fortune to put your kids in nursery. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds. If people think that this is going to save them a lot of money, they are never going to go back to work. And I know examples of that right now. And the other thing I know examples of is that the boss class have caught on to this. They too are, quotes, working from home, fitting in tennis, seeing their mates, taking their kids to school. All those good things in life are massively attractive, and the effect will be we will pay a massive bill. If this conversation was taking place in 5 years' time, I guarantee to you our taxes will be off the dial. And all this nonsense about switching off, I tell you what would be better in this country if some of the workforce, I don't blame them, I blame the bosses, right, would actually switch on, that they would be committed to their companies rather than just thinking, this is easy money, I'll stay at home.
Well, Kelvin, as always, thank you for your forthright expression of views with which I agree with almost everything you've said. But joining me now, who perhaps won't agree so much, is a political commentator and former Labour spokesman, James Mathewson. James, thank you very much for joining me. You're very welcome on GB News. Now we've got statistical evidence about the lack of productivity from working from home, and we know just from common sense that this is likely to be the case. Why do you think Labour, trying to show that the weakness of public services was all the Conservatives' fault, aren't encouraging people to get back into the office so they can improve public services?
Well, Jacob, it won't surprise you to know that I disagree with you, and I actually disagree with the assumption that this is some kind of given and that it goes without saying. I think this study is important. It's important that we get statistics about workplaces, and trade unions run various surveys and studies in our own country as well. It's important to always take the temperature of workplaces, I'm sure you'll agree. And I'm pleased that you're comfortably at home, as you've pointed out tonight. It shows you the benefits of this wonderful interconnected world we have tonight, that you can be in Mogg Manor and I'm in Mathewson Manor tonight, and yet we are still here being equally productive. I'm sure you agree. However, the survey from Stanford and that study showed something important, and that was that there was an increase of 13% in the quality of the work produced that was at home. So I do think we need to, this focus on productivity and the amount of work that is produced versus the quality of the work produced. And of course, the other thing we're not considering here, and I haven't heard you mention once, and Mr. Mackenzie sadly never mentioned it either, was the actual well-being of the workforce. The world is changing, and a lot of the times it's changing for the better.
On the well-being issue, I think that people who don't have families often find they have greater well-being being with the community that is a community of work, and that young people particularly have an advantage to get on when they're going into work, but are very isolated when they're working from home. And I think the isolation was something we saw very clearly during the pandemic. Actually, it was something I noticed with some of the people I worked with myself, that the community of work is a very beneficial one.
It is. Community as a whole is very beneficial. Everyone who went through the pandemic will attest to that. But I live alone. I'm a young person. I don't have any family. And I actually have a huge range of friends with differences on this. And I think that's important to acknowledge is if we're going to look at the world of work in the 21st century, look, you and I are going to disagree about most things. We're going to disagree about work especially. We have a different attitude towards it. We have a different belief in its role in society. However, I do think we can acknowledge the differences and the diversity in how people work. And I think it's important that we let them express those diversities. So I have friends who at the moment are working on a hybrid model. A few of them will a couple of days a week go into the office. They get their community access. They get access to those important group meetings and the kind of all hands meetings that take place. And then they can, decompress and work on those projects that they work in their own time. But of course, there are many people in this country who can't work from home because their role just simply won't allow it. So it's not as if everybody in the world...
That's such a good point. Could I just follow on from that point? Because, James, I think that's really fundamental, that very often the people in the lowest paid work, the people who are cleaning, from House Commons I saw this in the pandemic, the people who were cleaning, the people who were providing security, they couldn't work from home. But the better paid, the boss class, for want of a better term, they were able to work from home. And there seemed to be a bit of an unfairness in this.
Yeah, there is, and I'm pleased you bring it up. And it is, class is a central feature of our country. And I would hope the Labour Party, being the Labour Party that I know and I joined as a young activist, and the Labour Party that is run by the trade union movement, our very proud and successful trade union movement in Britain, I would hope that they will acknowledge that and they will fight better. Things like Angela Rayner's plans for work and for the future of work, because the focus on people who can work from home, which you often point out is middle class people, people in project management roles, people in office-based roles, those who can't and who face going into work every day, when they hear things like this and they hear debates like this, they must be thinking, well, I can't even consider doing that, so what does it matter?
Well, thank you very much, James, for joining me, and thank you for saying that the Labour Party is run by the trade unions. I think that's a subject we'll be coming back to. Thank you. If you are like me and you thought that buildings couldn't be racist because they are inanimate objects, you may be wrong. Find out in a moment. Plus, did Sir Benjamin Slade succeed in his quest to put himself in a position to have an heir? The answer will be revealed. Keep your breath bated for a few more moments.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
John Steinbeck once said of his 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath, that he intended to rip a reader's nerves to rags. Well, GB News sent its famously delicate Stephen Kyriazis to see an adaptation of the work in a London theatre, and somehow he's made it into the studio today. Give people a tiny background about The Grapes of Wrath. It's about the Depression, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Great Plains, which were absolutely ravaged by droughts. They'd completely overfarmed the topsoil, so they had all these huge dust storms, and basically the farms were worthless. So they reckon in the 1930s, about 3.5 million people left this huge central agrarian area of America. And this is a very poor, white working region. Often, many of them headed for the coast to California to this dream of orange groves, white houses, plentiful work. And we focus in on the Joad family. Very poor, very working class. Tom Chode has just got out of prison for homicide in self-defence, and he's played by one of the Treadaways, Luke Treadaway, who I confused with his twin Harry.
Understandably.
They are identical. And so they pack everything into this kind of old-fashioned jalopy. It's a bit like Beverly Hillbillies, but not humorous. I think there's about 13 people crammed, hanging off the sides, and they embark on this odyssey across the country. So there's all these huge themes about migration, about prejudice. They are viewed as an underclass by other Americans. So although they're migrants, they're not quite immigrants, but they're treated very poorly, as almost subhuman. When they get there, the dream turns out to be false, the pay is terrible, and then very often when they take the job the next day, the pay is halved. It's a terrible life.
It's a very angry novel.
It's an angry, dark novel.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, welcome back. We were talking about working from home and the public sector and productivity, and I've had some excellent mail mogs come in. Graham says, and this is an important point, IR35 means we can't claim hotel and other expenses, so working from home is the only viable way to make ends meet. That's a good point. Alan, no amount of money will motivate productivity. Only application and a will of personal esteem is needed. Personal drive, Alan, I think you're right. Oh, this is a lovely message. A certain gentleman called Richard Tice has emailed me on Mail Mog. Dear Jacob, I vividly remember our very first Reform UK conference back in 2021 in Manchester. From Manchester to Birmingham, Derby to London, our journey to save Britain has brought us back to the iconic NEC. Come to the conference. Well, Richard, what a very thoughtful invitation. I will think carefully about whether I'm able to come, as Nigel was very welcome at the Tory Party conference last year. As part of a £130,000 decolonisation project of the Welsh Labour government, librarians have been told that they should not hold meetings in racist buildings if they have the choice. What is a racist building, you may well ask? Well, it seems that it's any building that relates to the British Empire, according to the Critical Whiteness Studies training. Well, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. We asked the great people of Somerset if they thought buildings could be racist and if they should be avoided. And the people of Somerset, the City of Wells as it happens, have spoken.
A building can be racist?
No, I really don't. That is ridiculous.
Isn't it ridiculous even
Yes.
for a Labour government?
Yes, absolutely.
No.
It's an odd view, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, no, I don't think that. No, you can use a building.
Do you say that buildings are buildings and you can just go and use them because they're there?
Are they neutral? I don't think they are.
What do you think?
Well, I don't think they are. That's the whole point.
How can stone and brick be racist? I mean, people inside them can be. Companies can be, surely. But the building itself is ridiculous.
This evening's State of the Nation flabellum holder and former Tory MP, Neil Parish. Neil, do you have farm buildings? Are your farm buildings racist, or are they animalist, or do they exude a spirit that offends you or the cows from time to time?
I think what would offend the cows if I didn't feed them. And I think as long as I feed them and the building is sound and watertight and bedded down, they are happy. But I think, you know, the issue, isn't it, with this is that these are community buildings. The money was put forward by various people over the years, and it's like the Colston Hall, it's all of these things. You know, I mean, it's crazy because, you see, who are we impressing with all this? We're only impressing ourselves, the white population, if you like. like, and we're looking at it because, you see, as far as I'm concerned, if we want to help what were previous colonies, the Commonwealth, then let's actually do much more on water aid, let's do a trade deal with India, and let's help Africa. And that's the issue. The £130,000 would be much better off spent on helping those to get going in Africa. And I think this is crazy, and I think we're just sort of we're just looking at our own navels, literally navel gazing, and I just don't know why this money is being spent, and I think it is completely wrong. I really do.
Well, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because if you look at the history of buildings, you go back to things like the pyramids, they were built by slave labour. Do you say that therefore you shouldn't visit the pyramids? At what point do you say, well, we no longer need to apply our values to a building? And doesn't it also risk trivialising racism, which still exists within society? Because GB News has been covering this extensively today, and people like you and the people I spoke to in Wales are laughing at it. They just think this is absurd, and it makes people less likely, in my view, to take real racism seriously.
You see, I mean, we need to treat everybody equally, and we don't want racism in our society. But by sort of going around to try and find a racist building, I think you just wind everybody up, really. And if there wasn't racism there before, dare I say it, it may almost cause it. And I'm not justifying it for one moment. And I think that is a real issue, because, you know, if the building is convenient, it's done a great deal of have a lot of social use over hundreds of years, perhaps, or tens of years, then for goodness sake, please use it, and not sort of start looking. We're looking for something that's not there. It's not there because, you know, I mean, every race uses that building. I don't think the black community go into that building. I'm not sure because I'm not black, but I don't think they go into that building and immediately say, well, this was built by whoever. Now, they might question what happened with colonialism and we didn't get it all right by a long way. But I think you'll find they'd be very happy to go to that building. And I think it's just we, the white population, suddenly we've got to sort of beat ourselves up now, haven't we? And, you know, I'm not saying we got everything right, but do we have to apologise for being white? At the end of the day, I want to make sure that the black community and all the communities in this country we can engage with, but we don't need to apologise for being white.
We should be proud of being British.
Exactly.
And that is anybody who has a British passport.
Of whatever colour we are.
We should be even more proud of being from Somerset.
Exactly.
Anyway,
you and I both.
Two of us. 6 one, half a dozen the other. Sir Keir Starmer is set to release 2,000 prisoners in one day to free up space in the prisons for the rioters. Is this an example of the government's promised full force of the law, or instead an exercise in swapping one convicted criminal out for another? Labour's promised, if tautologically safe haven, will now materialise as 1,000 fewer rioters but 2,000 more criminals roam our streets. Is this really an adequate solution or an attempt by Starmer to trick us into feeling safe at night? Well, Neil, I'm glad to say, is still with me. This is a real problem. Our prisons are full. The old prisons that were going to be sold seem to be closed, but not then sold. The new prison buildings turned out to be enormously expensive. But the government refuses to think innovatively. Couldn't they have put some prisoners onto the Bibby Stockholm once they decided not to use it for asylum seekers? Why aren't they examining other ways of holding people at the end of their sentence?
Yeah, I think they should do. I did a programme called Banged Up for Channel 4 where I was actually locked up in a prison. And I think what I also found there was that there's not enough rehabilitation going on, there's not enough training, not enough courses, and we're turning prisoners out with very little and very little chance of actually going straight, very often coming back. It's not all society's fault, but there is some of it. And so, you see, all Labour is doing is, yes, we're going to be tough on those rioters. Well, let's make sure they're tough on all rioters, whether they're right-wing, left-wing, or whatever they are. Let's be tough on everybody. But you've also got to have enough prison places, and I think it's quite risky letting out some prisoners early. Are they ready? And I think, you know, the whole thing is that if they are going to actually put more people in prison, in the long term, they need more prisons, whether they like it or not.
We need to build more prison spaces.
And we do need to be able to rehabilitate people more as well.
I absolutely agree with you on rehabilitation, but is this one of the occasions when the Labour Party is right to say actually this was the Tories' fault, that we didn't build enough prison spaces and whisper it quietly but we had plans for reducing sentences from about 50% to 44% of the time sentenced for exactly the same reason, and that the riots have brought focus and urgency to the problem rather than created the problem out of nowhere.
Yes, I think we were partly to blame, but I still, I think this programme I did really brought it home to me, the fact that we can rehabilitate many more. And I think if we actually put more resources into making sure they have somewhere to live when they come out, it's not just a park bench when they come out, all of these things, then we can actually perhaps release more, and then they don't come back into prison. And perhaps it's not just prison space, it's also making sure we do more with the prisoners themselves.
And the prisons as they're run. I met a young man during the election campaign, actually, who just got out of prison. And he was explaining to me that when he got into the prison system, that was what got him hooked on drugs. It was within prison,
yes,
particularly when he moved to an old prison that was not so well run, drugs were rife.
Yeah.
He got an addiction in prison. That's terrible, isn't it? We need to make sure the prisons themselves are secure. And again, this isn't the government's fault because it's a more long-running problem.
They're even delivered by drones, and all sorts of things happen. You know, I mean, they get very often brought in by visitors. All of these things is so wrong. You know, we do need to actually tighten up on our prisons we've got, and then actually make sure they're not on drugs and that they are rehabilitated and less of them reoffend. Otherwise, it just becomes part of their life, and for some, it's almost security being in prison. And this is, you know, we as a society have really got to do more about it. So it's a combination of having enough prison spaces, but also making sure that we rehabilitate more so that there can free up the spaces that are ready, and then yes, come down hard on the rioters, whether they be left or whether they be right.
Thank you very much, Neil. Coming up, it's been the talk of the villages of Somerset for the past year. Sir Benjamin Slade, Somerset's favourite baronet, has been looking for an heir to his baronetcy. But did he find one? Find out after these messages from our sponsors.
Good evening. Here's your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Most of today's showers are going to ease and clear away as we go through this evening and overnight, but our attention is turning to a weather system that is out in the Atlantic and is actually the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto. It's heading towards the UK and is going to bring some wet and windy weather to northwestern parts tomorrow. But for the time being, like I said, many of today's showers will be easing, some continuing though, especially across parts of Scotland and western parts of England and Wales. Otherwise, a lot of dry and clear weather around, and with those clear skies, temperatures turning a little bit on the cool side, particularly towards the east-southeast, towards the north and west, a bit more cloud here and some brisker winds, so temperatures holding up that little bit higher perhaps. As we go through tomorrow morning then, it is going to be turning quite quickly, quite cloudy and a bit wet across the far west of Scotland, a brighter, drier part for eastern parts of Scotland and northeast England too. Cloud quickly spilling across Northern Ireland, so a grey start here and a bit damp in some parts as well. Some showers down the western side of England and Wales. For more central and eastern parts, it is going to be a mostly bright start, though there could be some high-level cloud making the sunshine a little bit hazy. Across central eastern parts of England, it is going to turn a bit cloudier as we go through the day, but staying largely dry. However, towards the north and west, we have that feature I mentioned at the start, and this is going to bring some very wet and windy weather, turning really pretty unpleasant. Feeling unpleasant then towards the northwest, but in the southeast, temperatures getting into the low 20s, so warm enough in any sunshine. More wet weather to come as we go through Thursday. The system will gradually make its way southeastwards, but it breaks up, diminishes a little bit as it goes. So in the southeast, just seeing a bit of cloud, bit of rain. It won't be as intense or as impactful as the wet and windy weather we're going to see in the northwest. Another spell of wet weather coming through on Friday, but signs of something drier through the long weekend.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we've been talking about racist libraries and the prison system, letting prisoners out earlier, and the mailmogs have come in. Nigel says, are electric vehicles racist? Look where the ingredients of the batteries are sourced. And on working from home, Dave makes a really interesting point. He's taken up my challenge to ring HMRC. Hi, Jacob. I had the pleasure of calling HMRC in the last couple of weeks. Over 2 hours and 45 minutes on the call, over 2 hours on hold, 2 hours on hold, 5 agents and the most laborious music system on hold that was worse than Chinese water torture wanted to throw my phone through the window. 5th agent could not understand why the 1st agent could not have solved my problem. HMRC, get back to work in your offices. The British honours system is engagingly complex. But the hierarchy of dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts and barons may be the limit of nobility, but not of titles. Created and sold for £1,000 each by James I in 1611 was the concept of the baronet, the only hereditary title not to be included in the peerage. It is, in effect, an hereditary knighthood, and King James set them up as a means of funding the crown. So last time State of the Nation was in Somerset, I spoke to Somerset's favourite baronet, Sir Benjamin Slade, after he put out an advert in the local newspaper looking for a wife to give him an heir to his baronetcy. Sir Benjamin told the programme that his baronetcy was at risk of extinction. So now, the moment you've been waiting for. Did Sir Benjamin Slade find an heir to his baronetcy? Well, with me is the man himself. Benji, thank you so much for coming back to see me. Are we going to get a new Slade?
Well, I'm working on it, you know. I've had a couple of narrow squeaks this last year, and thanks to your programme, I've had a lot of applications to go through. Some of them are sort of past their sell-by date, but otherwise it was great fun.
Excellent. Well, they can always mail Mogg, and I've been looking you up in this great work, Debrett's Peerage and Baronetage, and it's a very distinguished title created in 1831 for the first baronet, General Sir John, who served great distinction in the Peninsular War, and from his 2 wives had 11 sons and 4 daughters. So you've got a bit of catching up to do to get to the 11 sons and 4 daughters.
Well, yes, I do have a daughter, but it's off balance sheet, if you know what I mean. And so, yes, he was the worst general in the British Army. I mean, we did have the man who built the Victory, Sir Thomas Slade, and then we had several other people. Sir John Slade was an absolute rogue, and he was Paymaster General, and he used to pay the troops at the end of the year, and then he collected the money at the beginning of the year, and he hoped that they died because he kept the change, and he invested it in Hall's Bank, and Hall's Bank kept us going for sort of nearly 100 years, and they were great friends. And then I don't know, some chap ran off with all the money in about the 1890s, so that wasn't so good. But anyway, he was the worst general in the British Army. Some of the other ones were much better. I mean, we had the man, Robert Slade, who invented blotting paper by mistake, and my great-uncle, Uncle Basil, who actually invented the first caravan. It was so heavy that no horse could pull it uphill, and it had an upstairs and downstairs. It actually had a loo upstairs and a bath, but it wouldn't go under any of the bridges.
So it wasn't a very useful caravan?
No, he didn't make any money at all.
But tell me about the baronetcy. It's effectively an hereditary knighthood. Does it give you any advantages? What does it bring by being a baronet?
Well, it hasn't brought very much, actually. I do wish it's like being a sort of a lance corporal or a sergeant. You're not really an officer. You know, if you've got a peerage, you're all right. If I need to get 21 more people to die, I think, at last count, I might get a peerage. Then we'll have to really look out.
So there's kind hearts and coronet stuff that you are working through the list. But it's part of British culture and society, isn't it? And that's why it matters that baronetcies succeed and why you're so keen to make sure that your own continues.
Well, I think it'd be nice to have children. We made our money in the old days by killing French people. Unfortunately, that business...
well, fortunately, I think you meant to say, fortunately, that business has come to an end.
Well, unfortunately, because in 1900, you know, the entente cordiale and all that sort of thing, it was terrible, and we had to do other things. But it was they're difficult to kill, the French. They're like foxes. They think, you know.
Well, I don't think we want to be going down that route. I think we don't need to go back to the ancient history. But you were saying that your ancestor was an ineffectual general. Why was he so poor as a general?
Well, he had a thing called Slade's affair where he got his troops drunk, and they all ran off after a small squadron of French cavalry, and they got completely surrounded, and my ancestor was not known for his bravery, and he galloped away, and only 4 of them got around. It's called Slade's affair. It's very famous.
Right, right.
And then the other time he didn't want to fight, because fighting was very dangerous those days, so he made such a long speech. When he got to the battle, it was all over.
OK, that sounds a bit like me. I can make quite long speeches.
I know, yeah.
But one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is that you've been a public figure now for a very long time, and you've been somebody who's always welcomed the media into your life. And I'm doing a reality TV programme with Discovery Plus. Are there any tips that you would give me in how you present yourself to the great British public?
Well, I had to do it because I brought money into my house. I had to produce millions of pounds every year to keep the show on the road. So that's why I did it. Actually, I didn't particularly enjoy doing it. But you have to do these things. It's like being a politician. You've got to stick your head above the parapet. And, you know, we've just had Neil Parish, and he stuck his head above the parapet, and sometimes you get shot off. That's why I got a beard, because I'm hiding for the Daily Mail. You know, they used to be camped out down the end of my drive. It's not very easy.
Well, did you take them cups of tea, as Boris did when he had the journalists at the end of his drive?
Not bloody lightly.
Well, there we go. I'm sorry for that language. I'm not sure that's within Ofcom rules, but never mind. Thank you very much, Sir Benjamin. In a moment, we'll be hearing from someone on the front line of the battle for free speech and their victory against the state. And I've got a special reader of the Rees-Mogg making his media debut in a moment.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Charlie. And this is about Anglican Church, the Church of England, dropping the word church in favour of something a bit more modern sounding. Words such as community. Why are we afraid of the word church?
Well, that's my question. I mean, you've got to assume that they think it solves some kind of problem. But I think, you know, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about their particular religious institution, whatever they all have different names, don't they? And if you rename one, do you have to rename all of them? Can we no longer use an individual name for different religions, community buildings?
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You sound like him. Yeah.
No, certainly.
Oh, don't get any started on me.
Do I believe in a God? Yes. Do I believe in any of the particular gods that are offered to us? Still undecided.
I'm like you. I said exactly that.
You two are the same. You two are exactly.
What about you, Anna? Are you particularly religious?
Well, I'm not a proper religious. I won't name myself as a religious, but I really do respect religions. And we have bigger problems to think about.
Is it a sign of where we're at in this secular society?
Yes.
We're moving more and more towards that. The Anglican Church feels that the only way to be relevant is to take away any reference to church going, to being religious.
I think if the substance of what you're offering is good, it doesn't matter what it's called. You know, so if people are going to find solace and peace in a place that makes them feel better, they're not going to care too much about what it's called. So I think relabelling it, rebranding it, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but it's going to certainly upset a lot of people, I should think.
And people whose religion is important to them and kind of central to their lives, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
There's a reason Justin Welby is nicknamed by some quarters the Archbishop of Woke. Maybe this adds fuel to the fire, who knows?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Back. Well, I was talking to Benji Slade and the mail mogs have been coming in, but as promised, making his GB News debut, I have a special guest to read the mail mogs. Sixtus, what have people sent in?
Janet says, I have a son who doesn't do much normally, working from home. If Sir Benjamin needs an ear, he can have him.
So Janet's giving her son to Sir Benji. I'm not going to give you away. Have we got another one? What else has come in?
Alexander, Jacob, what it your full title? Considering your father was in the House of Lords and you remain a privacy counsellor.
Well, I think from now on I shall be known as the father of Sixtus after that brilliant reading. But actually, my full title is the Right Honours of Privy Council, the Honours the son of a peer, Sir because I got given a knighthood, Jacob Rees-Mogg. That's the whole gamut of it. Well, thank you to my special guest. In an important victory against censorship, Isabel Vaughan-Spruce has been awarded £13,000 and an apology from the police for her arrest after silently praying outside an abortion clinic. Are we soon to be subjected to all else thought police? Although free thought triumphed in this case, Miss Vaughan-Spruce has highlighted the sinister future that this type of action could create. As this case proves, there has been an obvious clampdown on certain points of view. Indeed, Labour is considering a ban on silent prayer outside abortion clinics. Well, I'm joined now by Isabel Vaughan-Spruce herself, as well as Lorcan Price, her barrister and legal counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom of Speech. Isabel, thank you very much for joining me. Although you've won, this has been a very stressful process, hasn't it, from beginning to end, and taken many months?
Yeah, I mean, clearly I'm delighted with the result and that the police have, taken some ownership of the fact that they've been treating me disgracefully for so long. But like you say, it's 20 months plus since this first started in December 2022, when I was first arrested. Then obviously had to go to court, a second arrest, and even after that, various tickets given to me by the police. So it's really gone on for so long now. And I think, it's been quite a shock to myself and others that something so Orwellian could still happen in the 21st century for such a prolonged period of time.
Yes, because the police were trying to work out what you were thinking in your mind, weren't they? They didn't have any evidence that you were doing anything. They had to say to you, are you praying?
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that when I'm silently praying on the street, there's other people on the street that have also stopped. Somebody might be having a cigarette, somebody might be, waiting for a friend or waiting for a taxi. The police don't go up to any of these people and ask them, are they praying or what are they thinking about? But because some of the locals know that I'm pro-life and will contact the police have supported them and helped to kind of enforce this, quite a spirit of division in the area. The pro-lifers are almost feeling like second-class citizens in that locality now because of the way they've been treated.
And this comes back to the issue we were discussing a week or so ago about two-tier policing, because it seems that Christians are more likely to be moved on for Christian activities than perhaps some people are of other religions. Does that concern you?
Very much so. And I'm really glad that, people are beginning to wake up to two-tier policing, because pro-lifers and other Christians have been at the brunt of this for a long time. I know when I have been praying outside abortion centres, just to say, I don't even ever take any posters or placards. None of my volunteers do. We've just got some leaflets of help that we would offer people. That's prior to the buffer zone. But we would be spat at and sworn at and assaulted by locals, not by people using the abortion centre. And the police would do nothing. They would turn a blind eye at best. Otherwise, they would tell us, well, if you don't want to be assaulted, don't come out of your house. That's the kind of responses we would be getting from the police. And yet, like I say, within 5 minutes of being there silently praying, the police are there, 6 of them, to tell me that my prayers are an offence. If that's not two-tier policing, I don't know what is.
Well, thank you very much, Isabel. I just want to turn to Lorcan, because, Lorcan, this has been an important victory and the work you've done has been instrumental in it. How concerned are you that the law may be tightened even further? So although this battle has been won, the war is far from won.
Yes, that is a real concern, Jacob. The Home Secretary is in a position now where she may decide to pass further regulations under the Public Order Act, criminalising on a national level silent prayer and the type of activities Isabel was engaged in. We're also very concerned about other cases that we're involved in. In Bournemouth, for example, there are 2 prosecutions ongoing there of similar type activities. And more generally then, Christians such as street preachers in Bristol are being really subjected to, I think, very intrusive, heavy-handed policing. And it underscores the problem that you've mentioned, which is a real perception that we now have 2 tiers of policing in this country, and that certain groups or points of view are more vigorously and indeed heavy-handedly policed than others. And when you enter that type of situation, it really does lead to a loss of public confidence in the legal system, and that is a very serious problem for any democracy.
But is it the police's fault? Because haven't these laws been passed by Parliament because Parliament was concerned about women seeking a service that is, for better or worse, legal in this country, and that they shouldn't be obstructed when trying to receive it?
Yes, obstruction and harassment have been long-standing offences under the public order legislation. However, this law goes further. In the last Parliament, the Public Order Act a new Public Order Act was introduced, which now criminalises influencing inside these so-called buffer zones. And the police are put in an intolerable position, really, in trying to interpret how these laws work in practice. But the way in which we've seen them enforce the law has been very concerning under existing laws. And I do fear that will get worse, particularly where you have a Home Secretary that seems to be against free speech.
I was just going to ask, in terms of success you've just had, how difficult were your negotiations with the police? Were they willing to accept they'd made a mistake and move on from that, or did you have quite a battle over this 20-month period?
This has been quite a battle, as Isabel has outlined. It's one of these situations where the process is a form of punishment in itself. We've had an apology already with the way this investigation was conducted. Isabel has already been acquitted by the courts. And this additional action then was for damages, considering the way she was arrested, searched and detained totally outrageously for a non-violent offence, as they saw it. So I think it was very disproportionate. And I mean, we are, of course, happy that in the end the right conclusion was reached. But it is troubling that we have to go to this length to reach that correct conclusion.
Well, Isabel and Lorcan, thank you so much. Congratulations on this important victory for free speech. Up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what is on your bill of fare this evening?
Well, another tremendous show, Jacob. I am asking, is David Lammy an international laughingstock? I'm also going to be wondering whether or not Keir Starmer has kept a single promise so far since he's come to office.
Thank you.
Will he bankrupt Britain to hit the green targets as well? We've got a Palace Insider on as well, Jacob, a Palace Insider, their first time on GB News. They're going to be talking about the Queen's Trump comments and what happens to a member of the royal staff if they do leak information to a biographer or otherwise. And we have a man competing against women at the Paralympics. So we're talking about all of that.
Oh, that sounds, as always, brilliant. That's coming up after the weather. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm in Somerset. The weather's absolutely glorious. The sun shines all night here in Somerset. It's fabulous.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather.